times, you can and should appeal your case to circuit court, because in circuit court, you can have a court reporter, you can have a jury trial, and those are really important things to get a fair judgment. Now, if you do, quote, perfect your appeal, meaning you post the appeal bond, you do have to pay ongoing rent. You can't just stay in the property for free. If you're still a tenant, you still have to pay ongoing rent, so just be aware of that as well. And if you go to circuit court, your case is heard de novo, which meaning anew. So it's basically starting over from scratch. Next slide. Now, if you either don't appeal your case, or if you lose in circuit court, the landlord can take that next step of getting the writ of eviction. This is that piece of paper that tells the clerk to the clerk sends something to sheriff to schedule the actual physical eviction of removing you from the property. That's all that means. Next slide. Once the sheriff receives that writ of eviction, the sheriff has to give you written notice saying when they're going to return to the property to either change the locks or take your stuff out onto the curb. They have to give you at least 72 hours notice. And important with this is it has to give you the date and a generalized time. Sometimes it'll say the sheriff will be there between 9 and noon, but they can't say that, give you a broad range of time. You have to have an idea of when you need to be at the home to remove your belongings, when you need to be out. Next slide. Again, you still have a right of redemption. At this point, it's called an extended right of redemption. So even if you lost in court, even if you're past the appeal period, if you're able to get that money together, including late fees, including court costs, including attorney's fees, and then at this point also including sheriff's fees, and you pay that at least 48 hours before that scheduled eviction, you get to stay. Now, if you do that, you pay everything, and the landlord does not cancel the eviction, that's considered an illegal eviction at that point. Once that landlord receives the money, they have to cancel the eviction, and they have to have the judgment marked as satisfied. And that basically means that you paid what you owe, which can really help people on their credit report down the line trying to find future housing, show that you've paid off that debt. Next slide. And that last step is the actual eviction by the sheriff. So they have to give you at least 72 hours notice, and they have to show up with the date and time that they say that's listed on the notice. So if the sheriff doesn't show up that day, they have to give you a new notice. You have to be informed of when they're going to show up. And it can only be the sheriff who evicts you. You can't have the landlord forcing you out of the property. It has to be the sheriff who does that. Oftentimes, the landlord will be there anyways for helping change the locks, but it has to be the sheriff. Now, next slide. All of this can happen rather quickly. From the day that you're late for rent, those 14 days to pay of when the court date happens, which is usually scheduled within 2 to 3 weeks of when that landlord files the eviction case, to that 10-day the appeal period, to the 72 hours before the eviction notice. I know it can be really stressful when you're going through a situation like this, but it's so important to reach out and get help as soon as possible. If you're struggling to pay rent, contact rent relief. If you received a notice from your landlord, call legal aid. You can call our eviction legal helpline, where we have volunteer attorneys to provide brief legal advice about your case. And if it's a situation that it looks like you might need an attorney to represent you in court, we can do a direct referral to legal aid. You can also reach out to your local legal aid office for help, but they do have income limits, can only serve people below a certain income. But the eviction legal helpline is available regardless of your income. And the phone number for that is 833-NO-EVICT. We also have attorneys who are fluent in Spanish if you're working with Spanish-speaking people that can communicate with them more effectively. Next slide. So I know that was a lot of information, but there are fortunately protections available right now. Some have expired, but we still have a few in place. Hopefully, as Cia Price mentioned, we'll see an extension of some of those protections. But as of right now, these are resources and protections in place to help people stay housed. The next slide. So the first of these is if you're behind on rent and you receive that pay or quit notice, you have the option to either, pay everything you owe, or you can enter into a payment plan. This is really important for folks, particularly if you only receive a paycheck every couple of weeks, and that first paycheck doesn't have enough money to pay the rent. You just need that extra time to get the other money to come in. This is really important. So you can enter into a payment plan that's where you would pay the total amount you owe divided up into 6 equal installments. Over that 6-month period, you would just pay a little bit extra each month to catch up on your back rent. Now, if you have less than 6 months on your lease, it would just be however many months are left on the lease term. During that time, as long as you're making those payments, your landlord can't add on extra late fees, and it makes it difficult to catch up. And so as long as you continue to make those timely payments, your landlord can't file an eviction lawsuit against you for non-payment of rent. And if you miss a payment, they have to send you a new 14-day notice. There is an exception to this general rule if it's a landlord who owns 4 or fewer rental units. They are not required to offer you a payment plan. But for most people, this is going to apply. And if you're not sure, ask your landlord or speak to an attorney, and they can find that information out for you. So this is available until July 1st of next year. The next is, this is one of those protections, again, that Cia Price worked really hard on last year as soon as the pandemic hit. And that is, if you're being sued for an eviction based on non-payment of rent, you have that right to ask the court for a 60-day delay of your eviction case. Now, there are a few steps you need to follow to do this. First, you need to actually show up to your first court date. We talked about how important that is. And you need to bring written proof that you've lost income. This is a bit more stringent than some of the other protections that have been out previously, like the CDC moratorium. So you have to have something to show that you actually lost income. Increased expenses, unfortunately, doesn't apply to this, just a loss of income. It could be like a pay stub showing you earned less, a bank statement showing you less money, a letter from an employer, or if you don't have any of that documentation, some courts will accept a signed affidavit of you just writing out saying, Judge, I was making this much before, and then during the pandemic, my hours were cut. Here's how much I'm making now. I've lost income, been able to pay my rent, and then sign your name. Be prepared to answer questions about that if you do present it to a judge, because some judges want to assess your situation, but you need to have something in writing. And then ask the judge for that 60-day continuance. We know a lot of judges aren't volunteering this information to tenants when they appear in court, so you need to be proactive and assert your rights. It can be really intimidating to be in court in front of a judge, particularly when there's an attorney on the other side representing the landlord, but you have rights, and I hope this information gives you the confidence to assert that and to ask for that right that you have in the statute. Now, this protection is not going to be around forever. It was tied to the state of emergency that Virginia was in due to the COVID-19 pandemic and is going to expire on September 28th. But even if your court date is on September 28th, you can still ask for the 60-day continuance. So up until then, you have that right. Now, this doesn't make your case go away. It's simply intended to give you more time to catch up on rent, to get access to that rent relief, to help you get back on your feet so you can use your right of redemption and stay in the property. Next slide. Another one of these protections, I talked about this right of redemption before, but I want to share a few more details about it. So as of July 1st, when that landlord sends a pay or quit notice, or they can send a separate notice, they have to clearly explain the right of redemption and make clear that paying part of the rent is not going to help you redeem. You have to pay everything you owe. And if you ask for the exact amount that you owe, they have to give it to you in writing. They can't try to lead you astray to where you're only paying part and they still evict you. This is meant to make sure, like I said, everyone is on the same page about what needs to be paid to help you stay in the property. And importantly, if the landlord accepts the money or knows that you paid the property manager and does not cancel the actual eviction, i.e. when the sheriff comes to change the locks or put yourself on the curb, that's considered an unlawful exclusion, i.e. an illegal eviction. And if you go to the next slide, I think that has stuff about that. Oh, nope, next is late fees. We'll get back to that in a bit. Another one of these that passed last year is there's now a cap on the amount of late fees that your landlord can charge you. We were hearing in some places landlords were charging, 15, 25% of the rent in late fees, which can make it really hard on a family to catch up on what they owe. As of last year, there's a cap on the amount they can charge you. It's capped at either 10% of the monthly rent or 10% of what you actually owe. That part is really important. Say you paid 80% of your rent, but you owed just another $200, they can only charge you 10% late fee on that remaining $200 that you owe. If someone has a voucher and they're late on paying their portion of the rent, the landlord can only charge late fees on that tenant's portion of rent that is late, not the entire rent amount. Additionally, the landlord can only charge you late fees if it says in your lease that they reserve the right to charge late fees. I think that's something that gets lost a lot, that all these fees that the landlord can charge you is governed by that lease contract. That's true of late fees. It's true if they're charging attorney's fees and court fees. They can only pass that cost on to you if you agree to it in the lease. In the next slide. So this is what I was talking about with the unlawful exclusion. If your landlord doesn't take all of those steps and it's the sheriff who comes to evict you, or they take your money with their right of redemption and don't stop the eviction, that's illegal. They can't change the locks, they can't cut off your water or your electricity or do anything to make the house unsafe. Now, if they do that, you can file something in court. This is a mouthful, it's called a tenant's petition for relief from unlawful exclusion. When you file that, the court has to schedule that first hearing within 5 days. That way, if you've been evicted from your home illegally, you're not waiting around a month until the court gets to your case. They have to schedule within 5 days. And if the judge finds that, yes, they in fact illegally evicted you, they cut off the water, they cut the electricity, or they changed the locks, you can recover $5,000 in statutory damages. This means that in addition to any costs that you incurred, say you had to go stay at a hotel during that time, or you had to buy extra food because you couldn't get into your fridge, or they cut off electricity so all your food spoiled, keep those receipts because you can recover the actual damages to you for what the landlord did. But in addition to that, you can get $5,000 statutory damages. This is a really important tool that went into effect of July 1st of this year. So if your landlord is acting illegally, let them know, hey, if you lock me out without going through court and giving me an opportunity to exercise my rights, I can go to the court and I can get at least $5,000 from you. That could be a really important deterrent for someone who's not acting in good faith. Next slide. At any point, feel free to raise your hand and ask questions, or we can wait till the end. I'll leave that up to y'all. I know I'm kind of powering through a lot. Wait till the end? All right, we'll wait till the end. All right, now this is the really important stuff right here. The various resources that are available to you. To the next slide. So Virginia has been way ahead of the game in terms of getting relief out to folks. In the summer of last year, they started the Virginia Rent Relief Program that provides payments directly to landlords on behalf of tenants who are behind on rent because they've either had a loss of income or increased expenses due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now they've worked a lot to improve this and are continuing to make changes to make it easier for people to access. Now, if you've had any back rent that you've been unable to pay since April 1st of 2020, all the way up to now, you can get up to 15 months of rent where you're just covered. You can also get 18 months of rent covered if it's needed to prevent you from being homeless. Even if you've already received some rental assistance previously, if you haven't hit your 15-month cap, you can go back and ask for more rental assistance. Now, they will pay everything that is covered under your lease. like I said, if you have a lease that says you have to pay late fees and court costs and attorney's fees, even if your lease says that you pay your water through your landlord, the rent relief program can cover that. It's also available now if you have a housing subsidy. Previously, there were some limitations around that, but they recently relaxed it. So if you have a subsidy, you previously tried to get rent relief but were denied, apply again because they've loosened up those restrictions. Important thing to know about this money is it's not a loan. You're not going to have to pay it back. This is assistance that the federal government has appropriated, and understanding that a lot of people were put in a really difficult situation due to COVID and the economy shutting down. This is assistance. Payments go directly to the landlord. You're not going to have to pay it back. Now, there are some eligibility requirements to get these funds, but I think for most people who are struggling right now, you're going to qualify. The main thing is you need to have some sort of lease. You're going to have to submit some documentation showing like that there's a lease. They're going to have to submit the ledger showing how much money you owe. But if you're in some sort of non-traditional housing situation, either you don't have a written lease, or say you're living at a hotel or motel, they're still willing to work with people to try to get them assistance. In that situation, as we'll go over a little bit, I would highly encourage you to reach out to one of the rental assistance navigators at the various legal aid programs to help you out. And they're trying to cover as many people as possible. So people think loss of income, like, oh, well, that didn't apply to me because I continue to work through the pandemic. But if you are previously receiving child support, and the person who is paying that lost their job and couldn't pay you, that's a loss of income. If you've had increased expenses, you've had to pay for your kid to go to daycare when you weren't before, that's increased expenses due to COVID. They're trying to be as flexible as possible. So if you're not sure if it applies to you, there's something on DHD's website, which is on the next slide, that you can go to check your eligibility status. But even if you're not sure if you meet the qualifications, reach out to the rental assistance navigators, I'll show you in a little bit how to contact them. You also have a rent that is at or below 150% of the fair market rent. I think that applies to most people, but if you're living in a luxury condo, it might not apply to your situation. Additionally, your household income has to be at or below 80% of the area median income, which is a technical kind of term that we use in the housing world. But if you're not sure if you qualify based on that, again, check the eligibility status website or reach out to the rental assistance navigators. So, tenants, you can apply directly yourselves, either online or by calling 703-962-1884. And landlords, you can apply directly on behalf of your tenants. So if you know that you have tenants that are struggling, you should apply. And it can be a little bit easier for you because you can submit every tenant's documentation together at the same time. That application is through Virginia Housing, so you can go to virginiahousing.com/RMRP. And then to the next slide, I have some information about if you need help applying. Say that you don't have access to a computer, this documentation is confusing to you, or you just need a little extra assistance. There are now navigators at all of the legal aid programs across the state, as well as the eviction legal helpline. And there's also assistance for landlords at Commonwealth Catholic Charities across the state and a few other housing counselors. So if you live in this area, you can reach out to the Legal Aid Society of Eastern Virginia. And this applies even if you don't otherwise qualify for legal aid services. Everyone can get help applying for rent relief. You can also contact the Eviction Legal Helpline. And if you're a landlord, to find out which housing counselor in your area can help you, you can go to homeofva.org, and they can direct you towards the appropriate housing counselor. Next slide. Now, if you are in next slide. If you're in the Newport News, Hampton Roads area, there's additional resources out there to help you. If we go to the next slide. There we go. There's a housing crisis hotline, and we have the numbers up here. depending on what area you're in. And that is the entry point. If you're about to experience homelessness or you're in the middle of experiencing homelessness, they can get you connected to the right resources. The number for the Norfolk, Chesapeake, Western Tidewater, and Peninsula residents, that number is 757-587-4202. If you're in Virginia Beach, it'll be through Connection Point, which is 757-227-5932. And for Portsmouth residents, that number is 757-966-2107. And next slide. Just as people are struggling to pay rent, we know that some people are struggling to pay utilities as well. There has been a utility shut-off moratorium in place, but that is going to expire at the end of the month. So even if you have been able to pay utilities up to this point, if you're struggling, you're not sure how you're going to pay that electricity bill with this insane heat we've had this summer, you should go ahead and reach out to try to get on a payment plan to pay off whatever balance you owe or any future balance. Up until the end of that shut-off moratorium, you have the right to enter into an extended payment plan of up to 24 months to pay off your balance. Now, the 29th falls on a weekend, so we encourage you to reach out to your utility provider by August 27th to get on that payment plan. We've heard some folks who have had a little bit of difficulty actually getting them to enroll them on the 24-month payment plan. And if that's the case, you can either divide up how much you think you can pay a little bit extra each month and extend that out, or on the next slide, we have the number for the VPOC Utility Helpline. That number is 804-313-9363, and they can help you walk through what your options are and help you get on that payment plan. Additionally, some localities have funds that come in periodically that can help you with your utilities. So for the City of Newport News Waterworks customer service, you can call 757-926-1039. And they've, I believe, still have some funds for arrearages, but you should definitely call to find out to see what is still available. Dominion Energy also has the Energy Share Utility Assistance Program and an energy efficiency program. This could be not just for your Dominion Energy bill, but for whatever utilities you owe, assistance is there. Now, you can only use this up to twice per year during the heating and the cooling seasons, and it's up to $600 for each season. Now, these funds, whenever they come available, they run out fairly quickly, so we encourage people to stay on top of it and to reach out as soon as possible. Don't wait until that last minute. And additionally, the Department of Social Services has crisis assistance where you can get up to $300 in help. One of the things that the General Assembly is weighing right now is what to do with additional federal aid that's come in to help people catch up on utilities. So hopefully we'll have good news soon about additional assistance available for people. And I encourage people that even if you've been able to keep up with rent so far, keep up with your utilities, but you're struggling to pay other bills, apply for assistance. That way you can have money to pay off the other bills that you're dealing with. Don't wait until you're far behind. And it's important to note that if your utilities get cut off because you haven't been able to pay, oftentimes that can be a basis for your landlord to evict you. So don't wait until that happens. Go ahead and get the assistance you need today. And to the next slide. So this for me is the most important part, is what can you do with this information? How can you help other people? So I broke it down to make it super easy, give you some ideas what to do. So the next slide. So these are actions that you can take that are only 2 minutes or under to do. The first is follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. The Virginia Poverty Law Center are always putting out information about resources that are available, changes in the law, information about Know Your Rights sessions, so follow that. Additionally, Delegate Cia Price is really great about making sure she gets information out to everyone on her socials about available assistance, how to reach out for help, and calls to action of you being able to reach out and have a voice in what happens in Virginia. And once you do that, share those social media messages with other people in your network. So if you see a really cool graphic that shows someone how to apply for rent relief, retweet that, share it, share the video. It doesn't take a whole lot of your time or resources to do that. Next slide. The next thing, these are actions that take just 5 to 15 minutes that you can do to share this information. One, you could go live on social media and yourself, create a little TikTok video that shows, hey, I just found out how to apply for rent relief. Here's the website and the phone number, or here's the steps that landlord has to take in order to evict you. Who knows, maybe one of those things will go viral and this information will get spread to more people. We saw a lot of really cool instances of that when COVID started, about videos of how to wash your hands. So there's a lot of opportunity there. And if you hear someone spreading misinformation, intervene. Politely correct them and say, if someone's saying, oh, I heard rent relief was out of money, you say, actually, Virginia has over $700 million left that can help you catch up on your rent. Payments go directly to the landlord. Make sure that everyone has accurate information and that misinformation isn't spreading. The other thing you can do is share these resources in your community. Drop flyers off at the corner store. Take it to the community center. Put it up on the pegboard at your church. Out in the lobby, we have a lot of these resources. We have information about utility assistance, information about applying for rent relief. This flyer is Newport News and Norfolk specific. And we have a tip sheet, so if someone is applying for rent relief themselves, it kind of walks them through some of the particulars that they need to keep in mind when applying. And on both of these, the back is in Spanish. We also have a sheet about how to get that 60 delay in your eviction case to give you time to catch up on your rent. We also have this really handy guide. It has a QR code at the back that takes you to our VPLC's housing website where all this information lives, as well as information about what you need to do if you need repairs, what the latest and greatest of the eviction protections are, and the phone number for the Virginia Rent Relief Program. And if you open it up, it has the eviction steps on one side, and on the other side, it walks you through how to file a lawsuit against your landlord if they illegally evict you. And lastly, this is more general, of a card that you can keep in your wallet or in the case of your phone that tells you what to do if a debt collector calls you. We know there's been a lot of fraud right now of people calling, pretending to say that you owe debt to try to get information out of you, or just, if you have an old credit card bill or an old medical bill calling up. Don't assume that you know what you're going to say when that call happens, because it can put you in a panic. Just pull this out and read it off. You should be asking the questions about who they are, why they're calling, what this debt is, not pumping you for information. So make sure that you know what to say. Just pull this out, read it off. So there's a lot out there, and I encourage everyone to take a stack home, share it with their neighbors and in their community. And if you need more resources, I'm happy to point you to where you can print those off online. Or if you want more copies of this, I will mail them to you. And the last slide we have is these are additional things you can do that can take 15 minutes or more. One is talk to your family, your friends in your family. You never know what someone is going through, what their struggles are. And so often when you're going through something, you're struggling to catch up on bills, it comes with a sense of shame, and you try to hide that from others. So when you talk to someone and share this information, you never know what that person's situation is. You never know who you're going to touch and lift up by sharing this information. Secondly, if there's community events going on, if you're going to a concert, which hopefully you're masking up when you do that given what's going on with COVID right now, take some of these resources with you and pass them out. It's an opportunity to share with others, to give back. And lastly is to come together as a community. I mean, a lot of you are probably already part of some sort of community group, whether it's a book club or your church group or, people that you just eat lunch with at work. That's an opportunity to come together, understand and talk about what other people are going through right now. This pandemic hasn't been easy for anybody. We've all struggled in some sort of way. And to really begin to address that, you have to talk to each other. You know, we're doing what we can to bring relief to people, but we need to hear from you as well. We need to hear your collective demands of what's going to help you get back on your feet, what you need from each other, from your elected officials to make that happen. And with that, I will turn it over back to Ms. Price.
Yeah, so thank you so much, right? And we fully expect that you have memorized all of these slides, but no, I want to give you a phone number. So if you are at home or here, I'm going to give you a phone number. You can pull out your phone and type it in now or write it down. But it's 757 266 5935. And I'm going to give it again, 757 266 5935. If you text us your email address to that number, we will send you these slides and more information that you can help pass out. The phone numbers, every single thing, how to get in touch, and even add to that some of the other Newport News specific information. So that's 757 266 5935. And I think Tempest again, because Tempest will be helping us get that information out. So the second thing I want to reiterate that Laura said was this idea of speaking up. Every single protection that you see in this is because people spoke up and we knew about their lived experiences and the needs that they had. And that's why we were able to go to Richmond to fight for them, because we knew what the needs were. In the same vein, in order for you to speak up for yourself and demand your rights in court, you really do have to know that, like Laura said. So unfortunately, if you're in court, you can't assume that the judge is going to tell you what your rights are. And we're working on fixing that. That's a little messed up, right? But just right now in this moment, it's so important that you know, well, I would like to request a 60-day delay, or I would, I didn't get my 14-day pay notice, whatever that is that you did or did not get. And I really want to reiterate that this does not have to be adversarial between landlord and tenant. The idea is that they're working together in order to get, like Pastor said, the landlord gets paid, the family or the renter gets to stay. The last thing that I want to say is to stay engaged. So some of this information will hopefully change in the course of the next 7 days, i.e. the utility shut off. We're hoping to get that funded such that, say for instance, your power, that won't get shut off. But that's part of that $4.3 billion that I was just talking about. That vote for the House on that bill is tomorrow. The vote on the Senate is tomorrow. Now, just a little civics lesson. If we pass the exact same bill, we can send it to the governor can sign it for a budget bill. The bill goes into effect at the governor's signature, which means it could be this week. If the Senate passes a different bill, then what happens is called a conference committee. So there would be some select delegates and some select senators that would go into a room, hash it out, get to a compromise, and then that's what would be voted on by both chambers and then sent to the governor. That could take a few more days. But all 100 delegates and all 40 senators understand we don't have a lot of time. So we're trying to get this done as soon as possible. So when I leave here, I'm actually going back because this is so important that we focus on it. Completely unrelated to this, we are also electing eight judges to the Court of Appeals. A law that we passed expanded the Court of Appeals by 6. There's one judge that's moving up to another judgeship, creating a vacancy, and then there's another judge that's retiring. Elections matter. That is 8 people that will be making decisions before the Court of Appeals. So if you didn't even know what a special session was before today, if you did not know that your delegate and senator are in Richmond for special session, absolutely no judgment, but now you know. And stay engaged. If you follow me on social media, I always put links up for how you can watch live. And my hope and goal is, as we're sharing information about evictions protections, that everybody is watching this like their favorite sitcom. It is often like a sitcom or a drama, I should say. But really understanding what people are saying, holding us accountable to the things that we've promised. These decisions impact you. I said that budget goes into effect immediately. What if there was a need that you had in your community, Mr. Jenkins, that you thought needed to be funded? Well, that's what we're fighting for. I do also want to say, since Mr. Jenkins is here and the mayor has been listening as well, some of the federal funding went straight to the locality, and I just want to thank you all for doing what you can for the waterworks and some of the rent relief programs that they had as well, that I have heard might be extended as well. So looking forward to some of those votes. But stay engaged. But now we definitely want to see if there are any questions from within this space. And if you're watching from home, if you have any questions, going to give that phone number again. It's 757-266-5935, and the best way to utilize that, if you can, is text. But if you call, go on and leave a message. And again, we are in special session, so at least give us 24 hours to get that email out to you. Are there any questions here in this space? Sure. If you could project for us.
Yeah, so the question was for homeowners or those who are middle income who are struggling to pay these high utility bills, can they still access some of the relief available either by getting on a payment plan or reaching out to Dominion Energy Share? The answer is yes. Anyone has a right to get on an extended payment plan. You should always reach out to Dominion Energy Share to see what options are available. And hopefully we'll have relief coming soon that is available for everyone who is struggling with utilities right now.
And so I know we gave the number for Newport News. If you text us at that number and just say, hey, I need more info for Hampton, what we can do is work up something for you, because I do represent parts of Hampton. We can work up that information and send it. If you're watching and you need information from anywhere within Virginia, you can still use that number. We'll get you either in touch with your delegate or to get you the information straight up.
And I want to mention too, I didn't put this on the slides because it's pretty renter focused, but that 60-day continuance, there's also provision for homeowners. So if you are a homeowner and you're about to go through the foreclosure proceedings, you can get a 30-day delay of the foreclosure proceedings if you've had a loss in income due to COVID.
Any other questions here in this space? Sure. Ooh, yeah, we're going to need you. Hold on, let's get you a mic. Give me 1 second. My old ears.
I'm just hard of hearing.
Thank you. Just wanted to ask, good evening. If you're on the other side of needing rental assistance, but due to all of the assistance landlords are giving, some tenants are put under pressure to get the rental assistance and maybe not be able to get their records or their ledger completed correctly to show that they're paid in full, and it's a fight. So what can a tenant do about that?
To help me understand the question you asked, so for those where the landlord has been applying for the rent relief, but the tenant showed that they paid in full, what are their options?
but the landlord will not give them a zero balance on their ledger and let them move forward, and they're up for a renewal for their lease.
Okay, the question was if the landlord is not giving them the ledger so the tenant can submit to show how much they owe, what are their options? At that point, I think it's when you should reach out to legal aid, a legal aid attorney, to help in that situation, or sometimes the rental navigators can step in, but they're not attorneys. Under the Virginia Fair Housing Act, something that passed last year is a source of income protection, or source of funds protection. So a landlord can't discriminate against you either in whether they're going to rent to you, whether they accept payments, or any of the conditions that are under your lease based on where the money comes from. This applies not just if you're receiving some sort of voucher, but also to rental assistance funds. The landlord can't just refuse to accept the money. That is a violation of the Fair Housing Act. So in addition to reaching out to the legal aid attorney, they could also file a complaint with the Fair Housing Office. And that way the Attorney General's office can get involved, investigate to see what sort of discrimination may be happening, and if needed, take proactive steps to put a stop to it.
And so connecting to that, Laura, we had received this question before. So how does the tenant prove that the landlord received the funding so that the eviction process can stop?
That's a good question. So how can the tenant prove that the landlord...
So if a landlord got the rent relief, because it goes straight to the landlord,
yes.
How does the tenant know so that they know their rights to stop the eviction?
Right. So any tenant can ask either the Department of Housing and Community Development, where the tenant application track is, or Virginia Housing, which processes the landlord track, to see the status of the rent relief application or the landlord status of the rent relief application, how much money is paid. I can get in touch with Sia to get you
So if you're asking for that information, what I just heard is that I need to update my website with those phone numbers as well. And so if you give us tonight to do that, then we'll definitely get that information out to you tomorrow.
Yeah. There's 2 different emails that you can submit. And additionally, if you're helping other people with their rent relief application, you can ask for a status on their behalf, but you do have to submit a third-party release form just confirming that you are authorized to receive that information. That's an important stuff. I don't want anyone to get hung up because of that missing piece of paper.
And that's really important too. If you have a parent that might be not as tech savvy, it is really important for those of us that know how to go through systems on computers. There's also people that this is the first time they've ever had to navigate a governmental agency because of the pandemic. So just making sure that you just breathe and reach out to those navigators so that they can help on your behalf. But if you're also able to help other people, let's say you have internet access at your job or at your church or mosque, you can open that space up and have a deacon or someone be the one that say, you know what, we're going to have this person be the one to help all of our members. They're going to learn the process, and then our members can come to them for help. That might be something that you all could do as part of a ministry, so that that one person can help many people. We also understand that as we are proposing to do $700 million in broadband access for infrastructure, broadband access is also about accessibility and affordability for areas like ours. There is also money in the budget for that to help folks be able to get to broadband. But until that budget's there, not everybody that's facing an eviction or homelessness has broadband access. So you just want to think about how can we help as a community make this as accessible as possible.
Yeah, so if you're working on setting up a station at your church, your mosque, your library, just take this little tip sheet, paste it by the computer so people know, because I don't know, I mean, I'm an attorney, I still have a hard time following steps. It's that ADHD, I tell you. And also there was a question earlier about, well, what if the tenant can't get the ledger, the landlord's still not cooperating? In addition to filing that complaint, getting in touch from the attorney, DHCD also has a process that the tenant can still get the relief funds even if the landlord isn't being cooperative, but you do need to send an email through the one that Sia will share later.
And what's that acronym stand for?
Oh, sorry, DHCD, that's the acronym for the Department of Housing and Community Development. That's the state agency that is handling all of the rent relief funds for the tenant side of the application.
Any other questions? Sure.
specific question instead of within this forum right after the
we
meeting?
can talk later in the hallway. You don't have to share in
I
public.
appreciate it.
Yeah,
Thank
of
you very much.
course.
All right, if no other questions, we're going to call Pastor Maxwell back up and just say thank you. So I did call, let me tell you, I called a few pastors that I'm really close with, and Pastor Maxwell, in all of the hats that he wears, said that, of course we could come and share this information. So just want to thank you so much for just being a good steward of resources so that we could get this information out.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Dobbs, and thank you again, Delegate Price. Can we give them another hand? Give them a hand for the information they brought. Yes. So we thank you all for coming. And of course, you said they could ask you some questions on the sideline, so you can ask her some questions or ask Ms. Dobbs some questions if you have questions that you didn't want to ask out loud. Sometimes we don't want to ask certain things out loud. But you all been a great audience. Thank you for coming. Share the feed to those individuals. And it's funny, I started getting messages because I'm a real estate broker as well. So some of my landlords are like, what are you doing? And I'm like, I got to take care of everybody. So just
You are doing the Lord's work.
Exactly.
You are doing the Lord's work.
Yes, we want to take care of everybody. We want to take care of the tenant and the landlord. So if people don't pay their rent, certain things happen, but landlords do need to make sure they give you your due diligence and go through the proper protocols and processes if they're going to do that. And a lot of times, landlords will work with you if you kind of forthcoming with the information. So sometimes, if you know something's going to be late, let them know as early as you can, because sometimes when you don't do that, that's when a lot of landlords get irritated. It's on the 5th and the 6th, and now you're telling them when you knew you weren't going to be able to pay, like on the 30th of the last month. So just make sure that you keep your lines of communication open, and you will be surprised at how far that will go, okay? All right. No other questions? All right, again, I saw some people came in late. We have Councilman Dave Jenkins in the house. He's here with us. Yep. For Newport News. And also our Newport News school board member, Marvin Harris, is here. So we thank God for them. All right? Without that said, God bless. Good night. I felt like Russell Simmons on that one. But anyway,